Ringship Discretion, 2nd edition. Written by Sean Alexander League. Copyright 2025. Chapter 1. Discretion. A ring in the sky, like God's eye. But it's just me, trying to be free. Captain Atticus Elliot settled himself beneath the glowing AGC, anti-gravity control, display interface, its light dancing eerily across the cramped cabin as he attempted to pry open the access panel. Ever since he had acquired the venerable old GS ring ship he named Discretion, the AGC plating had taken on a mischievous temperament, powering on and off at random intervals, sending sudden surges of gravity throughout the ship that left him queasy and off balance. The access panel was being difficult and wouldn't come off easily, so he went to grab the flathead screwdriver by his side to try and pry it loose. He searched with his hands, even lifting his legs, rolling from side to side and feeling underneath himself. Frustrated, he started to get up, and two gravities suddenly slammed him down. Now he was truly infuriated. His hands continued to fumble around him until they closed around a hefty wrench.
Hell, good enough. Damn ship,
he muttered under his breath. With a forceful swing, he brought the wrench down on the stubborn left lock of the panel. The impact reverberated through the metal with a resounding bang, leaving a noticeable dent. Suddenly, the gravity shifted back to Earth normal, momentarily catching him off guard as he adjusted to the change. Undeterred, he prepared to strike again, pulling back the wrench with determination. In his fervor, he inadvertently struck the bottom of the AGC interface. Instantly, the artificial gravity switched back on, and the access panel gave way, clattering to the floor with its corner narrowly missing his face. Peering through the newly exposed opening, Atticus squinted into the dim interior. He wasn't searching for anything specific, merely a sign of trouble, an off note in the familiar hum of machinery. Slowly, he hauled himself through the access hole using the control interface, inching forward into the compartment. As soon as he cleared the threshold, the artificial gravity faltered, reverting the ship to its natural, unaltered Earth pull. A thick layer of ancient dust blanketed every internal component, a stark reminder that these starship internals were never meant to harbor the quiet decay of neglect. Atticus exhaled sharply, releasing a large puff of air that sent motes swirling into the dim light. He coughed as the dust tickled his throat.
bad idea,
He grumbled, then reached into his pocket for a worn cloth to gently clear the surface of the fragile components, hopeful to spot any burnt wires, scorched electronics, or loose components, the typical hallmarks of malfunction. But there was nothing visibly amiss. Just after he began to settle back into his investigations, the sound of an opening hatch, soft yet insistent, echoed down the corridor. Before he could call out a tentative
hello?
swing, a captivating scent wafted over, a scent that stopped his heart and tightened his throat. With sudden excitement, he hollered,
Just a second.
and scrambled out of the access hole. At the very moment, Amelia's soft
Hi.
reached him from the hatch. Her voice was so startlingly close that Atticus jerked upright and banged his head against the bottom of the AGC interface. The shifting artificial gravity resumed abruptly, both of them tumbling to the deck, unprepared for the double weight that slammed them down. Lying there, staring at each other through pained, wincing eyes, a sudden thought flickered in Atticus's mind.
Maybe it's the control display itself. Every time I touch that damn thing.
Part of him longed to rise and tear apart the panel in a surge of analytical triumph, while another equally potent part yearned simply to remain there, lost in the depths of her mesmerizing blue eyes. Amelia began to push herself upward despite the strain, and he called out,
Hold on!
before giving the AGC display another emphatic whack. Without the extra pull of artificial gravity, she sprang to her feet with almost effortless grace.
Damn.
He exclaimed in a mix of surprise and self-mockery.
Why didn't I try the whack test first?
Her smile, laced with amusement, lit up her face as she tried to stifle a laugh. It was then that Amelia noticed the first trickle of blood escaping from under his scruffy blonde hair, running down his forehead in a fine crimson stream. Without missing a beat, she hurried to the galley, returning moments later with a stack of disposable towels, dampened in cool water. As she helped him to his feet, he attempted to steady himself by grasping the AGC display, but aborted the move at the last second, sending him back to the floor, wincing with embarrassment.
Sorry. Didn't want to risk touching the display again and sending us crashing to the deck once more.
He positioned himself on all fours.
Well, at least not sending you crashing to the deck anyway.
He muttered sheepishly with a smile. Crawling from beneath the stubborn panel with her assistance, he was led over to the couch. Amid soft murmurs and the quiet hum of the ship, he felt an ecstatic warmth. Her scent, the gentle touch as she tended to his cut, and for a fleeting, vivid moment, paradise was all he could see. All those wild dreams of exploration, all his harebrained schemes, melted away in the comfort of her arms. But reality splintered the tender moment. As his hand ventured a bit too low, she withdrew, sharply saying,
Atty, don't. I've gone back to my husband, and I can't.
He instantly retracted his hand, a tumult of restrained emotions surging within him as memories of the past year with her flooded his mind. Sensing his inner storm, she gently laid him down and pressed a cool, disposable towel to his bleeding forehead.
Do you have a regenerator in here?
She asked, in a tone that mixed concern with pragmatic detachment.
No.
He replied, a beat too late, confronting the pain.
Well, it's just a small cut. It'll be okay.
Leaning forward with tender determination, she pressed a soft kiss to his wound. When their eyes met, his was met with the vivid sparkle of her dilating blue pupils. Her left hand, deliberate and sure, began to slide up his shirt, her fingers trailing enticingly over his chest, a feature that always seemed to captivate her. At first, he let her proceed without reciprocating, but he knew she would let him rub her chest. It was fair and logical. A chest for a chest. And she was a logical woman. Taking the calculated risk, he lifted her shirt in return. She remained silent at first, a quiet tension hanging in the space between them. His right hand found its way under her bra, teasing her erect nipple. Yet, as quickly as the intimacy rose, she recoiled, inhaling sharply, before withdrawing her hand and his touch. Then, with an edge of practicality piercing the sensual haze, she admonished,
The hatch is open and the windows are clear. People could see.
Before he could muster a response or alter the conditions, she pivoted and exited through the hatch. Pausing briefly to cast one last fleeting glance at him, she tucked her shirt back in and waved her trembling hand in farewell. In a breathless whisper, he managed,
I love you.
as he watched her dash down the ramp, stumbling toward the main window in a desperate bid to see her retreating figure. The AGC panel betrayed him. The artificial gravity flared to life again, sending him crashing down to the cold floor. Emotionally drained and physically aching, he lay there for a long moment, staring into the void. He couldn't endure the tumult much longer. He had to get away from the painful heartache of what might have been. A sudden clang against the hull pulled him from his reverie. The hatch remained ajar, and the artificial gravity had still pulsed on, a fault that was never supposed to occur. The AGC plating was engineered to operate solely when the ship was sealed. The vessel itself acted like a Ronari cage, much like how a metal box functions as a Faraday cage, only here the barrier was for gravity. Regaining some semblance of control over his mounting emotions, Atticus staggered over to the hatch and inspected the 4 door switches, each designed to notify the system that the hatch was open. With a robust quad-redundancy system in place, he doubted that these switches were at fault. His eyes, however, traced back to the troublesome control display panel, the likely culprit. Then, from outside, a booming voice thundered,
"Do you have your AG on? All my shit is rolling toward your ship."
In a burst of controlled fury, Atticus slammed the hatch shut while shouting,
Sorry.
He then trudged back to the display panel and, with inexplicable determination, struck it again. In response, the artificial gravity flickered off again. With his head pounding like a distant drumbeat, he sank against the sealed hatch door, letting his thoughts drift inevitably toward Amelia, her eyes, her warm touch, and the bittersweet memory of their fleeting intimacy. After several minutes of brooding solitude, he forced himself to think of something else and nihilistically stumbled into his cabin. There, he collapsed onto his bed, reaching absent-mindedly for one of his favorite treasures, a small olivine-laden rock, an old meteorite that had been passed down in his family for generations. He rotated the stone in his calloused hand as its green, sparkling facets threw prismatic light onto the wall. His passion for astrogeology, which had once been a thrilling vocation, had gradually receded into a mere business front for an existence that balanced precariously between ruination and fortune. He made just enough money collecting interplanetary rocks to keep his head above water, though it barely offset the crushing expenses, and certainly didn't cover the costs of the legal battles with his ex-girlfriend, Ukpana Cherney. It had been several years since his former girlfriend, Ukpana Cherney, had taken legal action against him and managed to obtain an unlawful order to seize his ship, a state-of-the-art GS-23 Strato frigate. With the ship's status marked as in dispute, the court denied him access to it, promising its return once the lawsuit concluded, provided he emerged victorious. 5 years had already passed, and ongoing strategic delays suggested it could easily stretch into another 5. Her continuous stalling made it evident that she wasn't interested in the ship or any of his possessions. Her sole aim seemed to be to cause him prolonged distress. With her constant delaying tactics, it was a drawn-out punishment. Her interest wasn't the ship, he realized bitterly. It was the hurt, the endless torment of his pride. In contrast, Atticus's life had once brimmed with astrogeology expeditions, whisking curious blue balls, a derisive moniker for Earthers, into the mysterious, craggy expanses of the asteroid belt. But they rarely dared venture beyond. Big Sis, usually referred to as Corpos, or simply the Corporation, was the imposing solar system independent security force, the security arm of the 3 big corporations controlling the inner solar system. It had little control over the outer fringes. Since the court drama erupted, Atticus had piloted 2 ships, both second-hand wrecks. One nearly killed him when a buckled hull sent the vessel into a dizzying, endless spin, its thrusters locked in a futile battle of torque as fuel drained away, stranding him in the void. He broadcast a distress call on the Corpo's emergency channel, but help never came. The Inner Solar System Security Forces, or Big Sis, cared more about securing trade routes for the three corporate giants, enforcing the outer solar system blockade, and tightening their grip on the inner system than rescuing a lone drifter. Salvation arrived when a massive nickel hauler passing within 300,000 kilometers caught his faint signal and dispatched a shuttle. The rescue forced Atticus to abandon his ship and its load of rock, but the real cargo, compact and priceless, fit neatly in a backpack. He never returned for the ship, knowing scavengers would strip it bare after his widely broadcast plea. This real cargo consisted of brain readers, clandestinely smuggled by his crew for an enigmatic client. These devices, ordinarily reserved for government use under strict judicial oversight, were otherwise illegal. In practice, corporate agents from Big Sis routinely employed brain readers to pry into unsuspecting minds and ensure that restricted technologies never slipped out of the clutches of the inner solar system. After successfully delivering the brain readers to the client, he had enough money to upgrade to a slightly better, yet still unimpressive piece of crap, now called the Discretion. Brain readers were handheld devices that could interpret an individual's thoughts, categorizing them and displaying the results. If you needed specific information, like a person's birthday, you could search for it on the display. This was effective, but without a clear target, you'd have to use your own mental effort later to sift through the vast amount of information to find what you needed. These scanners were excellent tools for controlling the less privileged segments of society. However, those with financial means could buy illegal implants that either blocked the readers or provided false data. If you had more money, you could afford the latest implants that acted as filters, allowing the readers to only access the thoughts you wanted them to see. These advanced implants were much harder to detect. Exhaustion finally claimed Atticus as he lay in bed, cradling his cherished green rock. Sleep descended gradually, its gentle pull muted by the ambient hum of the ship. His tranquility was interrupted by a subtle mental nudge, a signal that a call was coming through his TC implant comm system. With a mental command of "answer," the phone connected. Instantly, he recognized the familiar voice of the man who had entrusted him with his most recent mission. The voice was crisp and authoritative as it instructed a meeting in 2 hours for a new assignment. A thrill quickened his pulse as he mentally confirmed, "I'll be there," and the call ended. Buoyed by a surge of purpose, he brushed the dried crust from his face and shuffled to the small, weathered sink in his room. Cold water splashed against his skin, each droplet sharpening his senses. Pressing a coarse towel to his forehead, he gazed into the dented mirror, a sly smile curling his lips.
Maybe it's finally my shot to come out on top.
He thought to himself. Before stepping through the hatch, he fired off a communique to rally his crew back to the ship, the prospect of a new mission already sparking their curiosity. 2 hours later, they arrived, dragging a hefty cargo box on a grav sled. The full motley crew had gathered, including Amelia, whose presence always left him both uneasy and comforted. Her blunt question,
How much?
met his piercing gaze, and a firm,
250,000.
a broad, infectious grin broke across his face, lighting up the room. She exclaimed,
I'm in!
with a fiery determination. He recoiled in disbelief, eyes wide.
But what about your husband?
He demanded, his voice laced with urgency.
He's the one who pushed me to find out how much.
She replied, her voice tinged with desperation.
Atty, we're in dire straits. We really need the money.
Travis Doc Forsyth, the dependable medic, interjected in a gravelly tone,
We all do.
and Doc's wife, Helen, chimed in with an eager.
So, what's the mission, Captain?
Atticus's gaze flicked to the gravity sled as he said,
Help me stow this in the hull, and I'll fill you in once we're inside.
He guided the box toward a newly welded hull modification. A Jay, Helen's curious nephew, eyes wide, asked.
What's this for?
Atticus's tone softened.
I carved a smuggling compartment in the outer hull. The hull's so thin, I had to weld extra support behind the cut. It's discreet. Only a real ship expert might spot it, and that's unlikely.
AJ's enthusiastic
Cool, they'll never check out here.
drew a wry
Let's hope not.
from Atticus. Atticus then attempted to maneuver the cargo into place, lifting the sled with the careful precision of someone who'd seen one too many near disasters. However, the lid of the heavy box stubbornly refused to fit.
Damn.
He cursed, then called to Amelia.
Would you help me remove this?
She quickly retrieved a worn but trusty crowbar, and together they pried the box top away. Peering in, Amelia's brow furrowed in confusion.
Look, Atty, they're just GD-15 grav drive plates, exactly like the ones on the ship. Why would anyone pay so much to smuggle something so common?
With a deft motion, she pulled one plate free, revealing a curious modification: flexible tips accompanied by an additional set of electrical inputs. Atticus examined it, a spark of intrigue igniting in his eyes.
What do you think it's for?
He asked softly.
I have no idea.
She admitted with a wry smile.
Then let's just load 'em up. Let's get moving.
Atticus said, his tone brisk and practical. Once the plates were snugly stowed, Atticus sealed the hidden compartment, and the crew filed inside. Settling into the warm, bustling galley, the captain's voice broke the murmuring silence.
Where's Ben?
Amelia answered promptly.
He's in the engine room, fiddling with the grav drive. One of the plates is generating more virtual particles than the rest, and it's causing us to drift.
Atticus leaned over to the intercom and barked.
Ben, get your ass to the galley.
Atty was startled when he turned back, and Ben was standing right in front of him.
Oh, good. Sit.
Clearing his throat, Atticus addressed the assembled crew.
All right, everyone. We're getting paid 250,000 credits to deliver 6 grav drive plates to IO Station. I don't know why anyone would pay that kind of money for these, but that's none of our business. Now, all we need is some plausible sacrificial cargo to smuggle, and then we're ready. Ben?
With a measured tone, Ben replied,
Right, Captain. Aside from that minor grav drive plate glitch and the quirk with the AGC display, everything is shipshape.
The captain's eyes glinted with a mix of amusement and exasperation.
Well then, it'll have to be good enough. They insisted we take off today, and for this kind of money, I'm not about to argue.
He stood up decisively.
Ben, head over to the salvage yard and grab a few cubic meters of quality parts. Just scoop from the bye-bye weight bins. If we get boarded, we'll claim we're smuggling spare parts. They might fine us, but they won't confiscate the ship.
With a curt nod, Ben replied,
Aye, Captain.
and strode out through the hatch.
Everyone, prepare yourselves. We leave in 2 hours. And for the love of gravity, try not to touch the AGC panel. It's still on the fritz.
Atticus warned as the crew dispersed to their various tasks. About 90 minutes later, Ben reappeared with the requested parts and a pallet laden with food provisions. Atticus directed AJ to help him load everything onto the ship. Stepping outside for a final gulp of fresh air, he marveled at the crisp brightness of the autumn evening. The sky bore a rich, yellowish-orange glow with the setting sun, and a gentle breeze carried the rustling whispers of fallen leaves through the hangar. His shirt, fluttered against his skin as the wind tousled the hair on his neck. A small reminder that it was good to be alive. Amelia appeared beside him, her eyes twinkling with mischief as she asked softly,
What you doing, Atty?
He returned her glance with a smile that seemed to capture the essence of the moment.
Nothing. Let's go make some money.
During engine startup, as the ship prepared for departure, Atticus casually inquired,
So what's on our flight path that we can be going to without raising suspicions?
Amelia tapped at her controls and replied,
Eros?
with a playful interjection from Ben,
Eros? I wouldn't mind going to the pleasuroid.
Their banter lifted the tension, even as Amelia rolled her eyes and noted,
Well, it's about 10 degrees off course. But by the time we get there, it'll be only 2. No one will suspect a thing unless they're watching intently.
Atticus grinned and concluded,
All right then. Eros it is.
With a few terse requests, they secured launch clearance from the tower. The Discretion shuddered upward, its thrusters roaring as the red hues of the setting sun bled through the cockpit window, only to be replaced by an intense, brilliant white as the atmosphere thinned to a fragile blue line. At an altitude of 100 kilometers, planetary control radioed for their destination and flight plan confirmation. Amelia coolly replied,
Eros.
a single word that carried both bold and suggestive meanings. A brief, amused silence followed before a gruff voice chuckled
You kiddies have fun now.
and granted final clearance. Atticus exchanged a triumphant glance with Amelia.
Well, I think that was a good choice.
He whispered. Amelia deftly plotted their course and engaged the drives to full power. The journey ahead would take roughly 10 days to reach the asteroid belt and another 20 days to arrive at Jupiter. The AGC interfered with the virtual particle generation integral to the external gravity drives, necessitating its deactivation during acceleration phases, though the sustained acceleration delivered a surprisingly comforting force. Descending to the ship's lowest deck, Atticus stood transfixed as Earth receded in the distance. There was nothing quite like the liberating vastness of space, a boundless freedom granted by having your very own starship and a crew that was as loyal as it was unpredictable. A crackling intercom announcement from Ben reminded him it was dinner time. It was at that moment when hunger struck with unanticipated ferocity, having not eaten a proper meal all day. At the dinner table, amidst the low hum of conversation and the clink of cutlery, Atticus leaned over to young AJ with curious warmth in his eyes.
So, what's your story?
He inquired. Before AJ could muster his own response, Helen interjected with a murmur about his troubled past, only for AJ to cut in sharply.
Can I tell my own story, please?
Helen shrugged in exasperated resignation and sank back into her chair. In a surprisingly measured tone, AJ recounted the tragic tale of his mother's descent into the addictive world of virtual mind games, how his father shouldered the weight for years until retirement, and ultimately how he was left alone when his father chose to drift into that alternate reality with his mother.
I visited them sometimes,
AJ added softly.
and they were happy in their shared illusion. But she could never truly return to reality.
Amelia reached out, placing a gentle hand on his trembling one, and murmured,
I'm so sorry. You're part of our family now.
Atticus, momentarily pausing with a conflicted smile and a fist held near his mouth, silently nodded in agreement. In a lighter moment, his tone now brightening, the raspy voice of AJ piped up,
So what about you and like Ben here?
Doc quickly replied with a nostalgic chuckle.
Ben and the captain fought in the FFBB war together.
The Freedom from the Blue Balls War?
AJ queried with an intrigued tilt of his head. Atticus sighed.
Huh. Well, yeah, that's what we called it back then.
When AJ asked if it was an adventure, Atticus's expression darkened slightly as he recalled,
I wouldn't call it that. So many innocent people lost their lives. Those not on Earth craved independence, and Earth felt threatened. Several countries on Earth resorted to the extreme measure of gunning down their own ships and people. But this only unleashed a fury from the heavens like nothing they had ever experienced. Earth stood no chance against the celestial forces that commanded the higher ground, yet they resisted fiercely. In the bitter end, it seemed we merely exchanged one oppressive government for the tyrannical reign of 3 corporate overlords. Now, these colossal corporations, ruling the inner solar system with an iron grip, are desperate to prevent the same fate that befell Earth from happening to them. They frantically attempt to choke off trade with the outer solar system, aware that those out there possess a formidable tactical edge by occupying a higher position in the gravity well. Their efforts to stifle trade and weaken their rivals are futile, merely buying time before the inevitable unfolds. War looms on the horizon, promising more death, yet those clinging to power refuse to relinquish their grasp, regardless of the horrific cost.
AJ, taken aback by the gravity of the captain's confession, sought to shift the tone once more, pointed to the captain and Amelia.
So what about you?
The captain rose abruptly, murmuring,
I have my own business to attend to.
while Amelia tenderly touched his arm as he turned away. AJ, his voice small and uncertain, whispered.
Did I say something wrong?
Helen shook her head gently, explaining,
No, it's just that they are in love, but she had a husband before they met. They are very happy together, and all of us can see it, but she feels guilty about it and had returned to her husband just before we left.
An awkward
Oh,
escaped AJ as the conversation shifted. The following day, the crew busied themselves unpacking and getting acquainted with the quirks of the Discretion. Every corner of the venerable ship held new mysteries, from its peculiar personality to the elusive location of even a simple light switch in the cold storage locker. Ben, ever the tinkerer, proudly unveiled his homemade radio detector.
I've rigged a trace on the power feeds,
He explained.
so I can map out where every wire runs.
Eager to assist, AJ asked.
can I run the tracer?
Ben handed the device over with an encouraging smile and patiently demonstrated its use. Leaning casually against the galley counter while savoring a warm chocolate chip cookie, the captain observed their youthful energy with a subtle pride. Amelia then strolled in, opened the fridge with a practiced air, and glanced over her shoulder at the captain.
I see that pride on your face. It's a good thing, isn't it?
He nodded sagely, a wry smile dancing across his lips as he replied.
Any luck reaching Stevens this morning?
She leaned against the counter, her voice soft with worry.
No, nothing. Can't seem to get hold of Stevens, Fendi, Drang, or even my husband. I thought it might be a comm glitch, but my test messages got through. They might just be busy. I'll keep trying.
On the third day of their journey, Ben and AJ dedicated nearly the entire day to the engine room. Surrounded by a tangled maze of circuits and jury-rigged systems, Ben explained,
Some of this wiring is so haphazard I can't figure out what they did exactly.
AJ, his curiosity piqued, asked.
Can't you just reset things to their original places and settings?
Ben grinned ruefully.
No. Each ship's a unique beast, even if built by the same company. Besides, we don't have all the proper components to restore it to perfect specs. Some of this stuff is so jury-rigged. We have to be careful. The captain would be livid if we broke something mid-run.
AJ nodded, absorbing every word as they meandered through the maze-like configuration. Wandering around the ship's central ring, AJ pointed to a peculiar component.
What are these? The captain said to install an extra one, right?
Ben glanced over and confirmed.
Oh, yeah.
He explained,
These are the MFGs, magnetic field generators. They create a protective magnetic shield around us, guarding both the ship and us from harmful radiation. Every vessel that escapes Earth's magnetic field uses them.
AJ's eyes widened.
Why do we need two? As a backup?
Ben shook his head.
Not as backup. The captain wants us to double the field strength. Io, near Jupiter, has a ferocious flux of charged particles. 2 generators ensure we're safe. Ever wonder why our ship is ring-shaped?
AJ nodded, pondering aloud.
So that charged particles can pass through the center without hitting the ship, right?
Ben continued.
Exactly. It's a large magnetic toroid with the north and south.
He was abruptly interrupted by a chirp on the intercom.
Ben, can you come up here?
Amelia's voice was light, but insistent. Ben followed the summons up to the bridge, with AJ trailing behind. There, they found the captain standing atop a table, fiddling with an electrical ceiling panel as if it were a puzzle only he could solve. Ben approached cautiously.
Need some help there?
The captain, with a pair of pliers comically clamped in his mouth, declared,
I needs Kuian Pua.
Tilting his head in amused confusion, Ben asked,
You need clean power? What? For your telescope?
Removing the pliers, Atticus replied,
Yeah, I was using it last night, and my tracking was all glitchy. I noticed breaks and spikes in the voltage that left images saturated with strange artifacts, too.
Ben grinned at Amelia before replying confidently.
Sure, Captain. I'll see what I can do.
By the 5th day, at a cheerful breakfast meeting, the captain settled into a chair, his leg casually draped over its side, and picked up a steaming slice of French toast. As he reached for the strawberry jam, he called out,
Ben, excellent job on the provisions this time.
A chorus of voices erupted in a raucous,
Hell yeah! Here, here!
Ben, his face lighting up, teased,
So does that mean we can really stop by Eros for a day of fun?
Atticus chuckled and replied.
After this run, you can even buy your own Eros.
Ben's eyes twinkled with mischief.
I like the sound of that. Of course, I wouldn't mind a few fine dancing girls either.
He jumped up and began a playful dance that drew laughter and light protests from both Helen and Amelia. Clearing his throat, the captain resumed in a more serious tone.
As of today, we're halfway to the asteroid belt and 1/6 of the way to Io. I don't have much new to say. Just keep ironing out the bugs and familiarize yourselves with the ship. Oh, Amelia, any luck getting in touch with anyone?
Amelia drew the fork from her mouth delicately, touching it to her plate before conceding.
No, nothing. I'm really starting to worry. This morning, not even the hangar office we rent from answered.
Helen piped in gently.
It's Saturday today.
Amelia's eyes widened in a mixture of shock and relief.
Oh yeah, that explains that. But still, why isn't anyone returning my calls? Even my husband. Do you think maybe he's upset, even though he told me to come?
Atticus reached out instinctively, but the gesture felt wrong, so Helen intervened softly.
Don't worry, everything will be okay. In a few weeks, we'll all be free to do what we want, whenever we want.
Chapter 2. The Inspection. The bonds of Earth were broken, but freedom was a false token. For the Big Three, again, took it from me. 8 days into the journey, Ben appeared on the bridge and announced,
I finally figured out the issue with the drive plating. The previous owner replaced one of the power cables with an unmarked yet more efficient type, which ended up supplying more power to that one plate than the others. It's a stupid mistake. I do have a spare cable, but I'll need to shut the engines down for a few moments to install it.
Atticus glanced at Amelia for confirmation, then said,
Go ahead.
A routine warning alarm sounded, and after 30 seconds, the engines powered down. When they did, everyone in the cabin began to float freely. 15 minutes later, Ben's voice crackled over the intercom.
You can try it now.
The captain looked at Amelia, but something had caught her attention. As he started to move, she called out,
Hold on. While the engines were down, I decided to look around. Check this out.
Atticus floated over to the sensor panel and could see a border patrol ship pinging them with its radar, heading directly for them.
Crap. Can we outrun them?
He asked.
No chance.
She replied.
But that's not my main concern.
Atticus, surprised, asked.
What?
She pointed to a faint echo that appeared every time the border patrol's radar bounced off of whatever it was.
There is another ship. It's also heading right for us. And it's gaining fast.
On long trips, the captain often used his 1-meter telescope mounted on the hull for amateur research. Although it couldn't match the huge professional gravity lens scopes, it was fun and made him feel like he was making a contribution. Plus, it came in handy for situations like this. He aimed the telescope at the mysterious ship, cranked its power to near the theoretical limit, recorded a few tens of thousands of frames, and had the computer statistically enhance them together into an image exceeding the optical capabilities. The resulting image showed a large vessel with a forward bridge, an extensive aft section, and a long, thin midsection connecting them. But its configuration was unfamiliar.
How long until it catches us?
He asked. Amelia, examining the display, replied,
Assuming we restart the drives. The customs ship will reach us first, in about a day.
Atticus looked at her and then declared,
Well, at least I know what to expect from customs, so let's get underway. Can you keep an eye on our new friend?
Amelia looked back at him.
I didn't notice either ship before since our drives were creating interference, so I don't think we will be able to see them while we are underway, at least not until they are much closer.
The next day, a communique came through.
Ring-class vessel. This is the GSS Vigilant. Shut down your drives and prepare to be boarded for customs inspection.
Atticus responded,
This is Captain Atticus Elliot, aboard the Discretion. We are complying.
He then leaned over to ask Amelia.
Anything from our other mysterious friend?
She replied,
No, nothing. The customs ship has been bombarding us with intense scans for 24 hours, and we're practically blind.
Atticus then addressed his crew.
Everyone, get ready. Keep control of your thoughts so the implants can do the rest. Remember, we're only smuggling spare parts.
30 minutes later, as the Vigilant's tan upper superstructure appeared beneath the Discretion, the captain had to rotate the ship 90 degrees so the Vigilant could extend its gantry. Soon, there was a heavy banging on the hatch. Atticus opened the inner hatch and quickly spun the outer one, then backed off as 2 men floated in via the tube. The older man, a lieutenant with the edges of his short black hair graying, had a matter-of-fact demeanor, while his younger companion, sporting a close-shaven blonde head, exuded an air of suspicion. The lieutenant gestured toward an ensign, who produced a large scanner, methodically scanning everyone.
I have all their DNA. They are who they say they are,
The ensign declared. The lieutenant then remarked,
So, Captain, I see you fought in the war, on the right side.
Atticus replied,
I'm not sure there ever was a right side.
The lieutenant pursed her lips in thought before returning to her impassive expression. The ensign then scanned the captain's brain waves.
Oh, so you're smuggling spare parts. Lieutenant, should we arrest them?
The lieutenant waved her hand dismissively.
Don't worry about that. Just finish your scans.
However, when the ensign turned the scanner on Amelia, the device flashed red and blared loudly.
Sir, she has an implant.
The ensign recoiled and drew his gun. Instantly, Ben gripped his shotgun, prepared for a firefight, and 2 more customs agents zoomed up the gantry-way tube to assist. Raising his hands as he backed up, Atticus said,
Whoa, let's not get crazy here.
He watched the lieutenant, who was now preoccupied, her hand pressed against her forehead as though talking on a comm, and then suddenly her expression shifted to concern.
Ensign, you two, back to the ship, now!
She ordered, before turning back and warning.
This isn't over. Don't go anywhere.
The agents retreated down the gantry, allowing Ben to relax his grip on the shotgun.
What the hell was that?
He murmured. Atticus quickly began shutting the hatch while replying.
Hell if I know.
Suddenly, the tube lit up like the sun, and his face flushed as he instinctively ducked behind the hatch door. In a heartbeat, a vacuum took hold, and the door slammed shut with incredible force, yanking Atticus along and striking his chest against the hatch wheel. Barely able to breathe or give orders, Atticus caught sight of something through the window, a huge, slender, black vessel.
The other ship! It's here! And I think it just hit us.
Amelia yelled. Though half bent over and struggling to speak, the captain began signaling Amelia. She understood immediately and maneuvered the ship to trail behind the customs vessel.
That beam must have taken out the plating. No response. Switching to thrusters.
She shouted. As the Discretion slid into position behind the Vigilant, another beam struck, and with so much debris flying, they could see the beam traveling from the black ship to theirs. A deafening pop and explosion followed, and amidst rising panic, Amelia frantically banged on the control panel, trying to get any maneuvering system to respond. Drifting behind the Vigilant, they watched as parts of the black ship began to sparkle. In a strained whisper, the captain announced,
The customs ship has gamma rays.
More beams from the black ship lit the debris until they could finally see a beam penetrate the Vigilant, which was now in between the black ship and the Discretion. The Vigilant's port side began to glow, then melted away. The black ship's forward section started to swing around the front of the Vigilant.
They're repositioning for another shot at us,
the captain managed to say. As the black ship maneuvered, the Vigilant's port gamma ray guns deployed, and it spun to starboard in an attempt to counterattack. Then a laser beam from the rear of the black ship vaporized the Vigilant's bridge, and every thruster on the Vigilant fired in unison. The rear of the customs ship now faced the Discretion as a massive column of flame engulfed them, sending them spinning. The Vigilant then accelerated forward under full thrusters. She then slammed into the cross-braced midsection of the black ship, with her rear thrusters still firing at full throttle. The rear of the Vigilant swung on the pivot point of contact and into the engine section of the black ship. The momentum crushed the Vigilant's aft section, and she exploded. Everyone hovered near the control panel, helplessly watching as space filled with a white fireball, and the Discretion shuddered violently when a piece of shrapnel hit so hard the forward bulkhead bent inward. They all inhaled deeply, as if it might be their last breath. Seconds later, nothing happened, until the glass on the sensor control panel shattered, causing a collective jump. Amid the commotion, Atticus only noticed the incessant noise from his telecommunication implant once it suddenly went silent.
The black ship must have been jamming us. Status report.
He barked. Amelia's measured reply came through.
We're dead in space. No thrusters, no gravity drives. And who knows what else?
Atticus continued.
Okay, Ben. Head down to the lower decks and see what you can find.
Peering out the window for a better look, he reached for the stowed binoculars and took a look at the black ship. The front section of the black ship had completely detached and was drifting away. He could see crew moving on their bridge, but with half their ship gone, they were no longer a threat. Scanning the wreckage, he asked,
Think we can salvage any parts from these ships if needed?
Amelia replied after a pause.
Maybe, but I first need to assess what we've lost.
A few tense minutes passed as the crew recovered. The only sound was Amelia, methodically pressing buttons as she checked systems. Helen began gathering shards of glass floating in the cabin, soon joined by her husband and AJ. When Ben returned from the lower decks, but before he could speak, the captain announced,
I've got an idea. Are the MFGs still operational?
Ben nodded.
Both are fine. The only...
Atticus interrupted.
Amelia, can you stop the ship's rotation using the MFGs?
Amelia replied,
Normally, this far from the sun, it would take hours. But since one of those ships is still emitting its own field, we can push against it. It might take about 15 to 20 minutes.
Atticus nodded.
Good. Make sure our hatch faces the wreckage and turn on the internal gravity plating.
Amelia reached for the gravity control panel.
Everyone ready?
She asked, flipping the power switch. 30 seconds later, the sound of thousands of tiny objects falling and bouncing across the floor filled the cabin. She quickly rose, grabbed Ben's arm, and dragged him towards the lower decks. A few minutes later, she reappeared on the bridge, announcing,
I've set the MFGs. It should only be a few minutes.
She moved behind the chair where AJ sat, staring out the window.
Get ready to suit up,
The captain ordered. Interrupting, AJ said,
Captain, you've got an incoming message.
Still squinting through his binoculars, Atticus responded.
Just put it on speakers.
AJ pressed play.
Atticus, this is Stevens. I don't know what you're hauling this time, but they've killed Drang and tortured Amelia's husband to death, along with...
Glass shards erupted as Atticus slammed the mute button. Amelia froze, her breath catching in her throat as if the air had turned to ice. Her hands gripped the edge of the chair, knuckles whitening, and her eyes darted to Atticus, not with rage, but with a desperate plea, as if he could undo the words. Bert. Tortured. Dead. The thought clawed at her mind, jagged and unreal. Her trembling started small, a quiver in her lips, then spread until her whole body shook. Then, like a dam breaking, she lurched from the chair, fists flying at Atticus.
Atty, this is all your fault. It's all your fucking fault.
She screamed, her voice cracking with raw anguish. The rest of the crew froze, unsure how to react, while Atticus winced with each blow until he enveloped her in a tight hug. Amelia's sobs shook her frame, her tears soaking his chest as she went limp, her legs buckling. He steadied her, whispering,
I'm here.
though the words felt hollow against her grief. They stood locked in that embrace for several minutes, the silence heavy, until an alarm blared from the sensor panel. Ben moved to investigate. Atticus lifted his head, his voice soft but urgent.
I'm so sorry, Amelia. But we need you now.
She shoved him back with a weak punch, her fist trembling as it connected.
I can't do this.
Her mind screamed to collapse, to let the pain consume her. But the alarm's shrill wail cut through the fog. The crew needed her. Bert would want me to keep going. Her jaw clenched, and she forced herself to stand straight, swaying slightly as she wiped her tear-streaked face with a shaking hand. Fixing Atticus with a glare that mixed determination and defiance, she barked,
You heard him. Suit up.
The crew, stunned by her sudden command, scrambled into action, their movements snapping her focus back to the present. As the Discretion ceased its rotation, Atticus activated the vacuum pumps to evacuate the cabin air. Once the cycle completed, he opened the inner and outer hatches, only to find that, as on Earth, the artificial gravity remained active. Their motion away from the debris slowed, and as they began to accelerate towards the wreckage, small fragments of metal began flying in through the hatch and sticking to the gravity plates on the floor. Pressing the talk button on his mic, he instructed,
Ben, notify me when we're closing in at 5 meters per second, and I'll shut the hatch.
Ben replied.
Aye, Captain.
Atticus glanced back at Amelia, who sat in the pilot's seat, adjusting controls as if nothing had happened, even though guilt gnawed at him, despite knowing it wasn't entirely his fault. After about 15 minutes, Ben announced over SUTCOM,
Captain, we're now at 5 meters per second.
Atticus closed the outer hatch, but tripping on a heap of debris amassed by the floor's artificial gravity, he stumbled. Looking down, he saw a large pile of wreckage clutching the door. He stepped over most of it and pushed it aside with his boot.
How long before impact?
He asked. Ben answered.
About 12 minutes.
The captain murmured.
I assume the docking clamps and grapplers are still working. Should have asked before we did this.
Ben confirmed.
Aye, all green indicators.
Relieved, the captain shut the inner hatch and commanded,
Good. Grapple the superstructure as we impact, and retract my telescope if it's still up there.
Over the SUTCOM, Amelia reported.
Atty, I've got a full damage report. We lost the 4-port grav drive plates. Only the mounting bases remain. We also lost the main computer interface module for the drives. As for the thrusters, they hit the turbo pumps and main injector assembly. They knew exactly where to hit us. The engine room is also open to space where the beam penetrated. That piece of shrapnel from the explosion took out our long-range radar, although we still have short-distance ranging.
The captain listened to her cool, methodical report and responded.
What can we fix?
Amelia replied.
Those big ships likely don't have compatible drive plates, but we might be able to use the spare ones we're smuggling.
Atticus turned to her, thinking. Ben interjected.
Sir, the thrusters are fucked. There's no way to fix that mess.
Amelia, speaking louder, not appreciating being interrupted.
The good news is that both ships will probably have compatible drive computer interface modules. Worst case, we'd reroute commands. As for the radar, unless we physically detach their entire assembly and strap it to our ship, I don't see any solution.
Ben then pointed toward the hatch window.
2 minutes.
The captain nodded.
Okay, ready the hooks. And once we're attached, I want Ben, AJ, and Doc to search that ship for salvageable parts. Amelia.
He paused, uneasy to ask, but knowing it was necessary.
You and I will try to jury-rig these drive plates. Helen, monitor comms.
Here we go. Everyone hold on to your butts.
Ben shouted as the Discretion collided with the central I-beam superstructure of the black ship. Ben fired the grapplers, securing the Discretion to the enormous hulk. The captain then banged the gravity control panel, and everyone suddenly free-floating. He opened the hatches and grabbed the welding equipment. Ben, with a cutting torch strapped on, signaled the others to follow. The captain and Amelia made their way around the ship to the smuggler's hatch, a sense of urgency in their movements. As they began to haul out the massive crate, She suddenly laid her hand firmly on his arm, halting him in mid-motion. She pressed her helmet against his, choosing not to use the comms. Her voice came through the touching helmets.
I'm sorry for blaming you.
In the blinding brilliance of the sunlight, she could see Atticus's tears, a raw and glistening testament to the emotional storm she had stirred within him. Choking up, he replied,
No, I'm sorry for everything I've done.
Gently, she pulled the visor to shade his eyes, and when he looked up, her loving gaze softened him, until suddenly her expression hardened.
We need to get this done.
Nodding, Atticus resumed pulling the crate, muttering bitterly.
Shit, now I can't see a damn thing.
He tried wiping his eyes on the Velcro and fabric inside his helmet. They hauled the crate around, back into the ship, and retrieved one of the panels. Atticus looked at the panel.
It looks just like our GD15s except for some extra add-ons, but it has the same main connector. Do you think we can just weld these on?
Amelia murmured,
I don't think...
but Ben interrupted sharply.
No, don't weld the grav plates. It will destroy them. There should be a central hole. Just put a bolt through it and weld the bolt to the old base. That is supposed to be a pivot point, so we can gimbal the plates. But we will be able to steer with the intact starboard drives, so don't worry about it.
Okay, thanks, Ben. How's it going over there?
The captain asked. Ben's voice crackled a little.
We just burned through one of the outer hatches and the inner hatch opened easily. No pressure. Few dead bodies, but the Electron... Son of a bitch. This is a blue ball ship. The patches say United States. Why the hell would they be out here after us?
The captain halted abruptly, his eyes wide with urgency, and exclaimed,
I have no idea. But it must be something monumental if they're pursuing us all the way out here, risking an all-out war with the Corpos. Keep searching and report back immediately if you discover anything. Amelia and I have scavenged some rods and soft spacers that should suffice, so we're heading out now to install the plates. Helen, what's the situation with our contacts?
Helen's voice was tense as she replied,
It's up to 11 ships now. 8 from Big Sis Corpos and 3 additional Earth ships. The closest one has definitely picked up speed. They're only 34 hours away at their current velocity.
Raising his voice, the captain exclaimed,
Holy shit! Even with all those gamma rays flying around from the firefight, it shouldn't have attracted that much attention. Well, I don't think I need to tell everyone to move their ass, but I'm going to say it anyway. Move your ass.
There were multiple responses.
Aye, Captain.
Amelia and the captain went back out the hatch with one of the plates and a set of rods and spacers. As they worked their way underneath the ship, Amelia was taken aback by the damage.
Shit, there's nothing left of the old plates.
Atty nodded as he grabbed an end of a cable sticking out of the hull.
This looks like the right one, and the laser didn't get the connector. Lucky on that.
She traced a wire nub and said,
Not on this one, though. Look.
She backed away, pointing to the visible outline of the gantry-way shadow burned into the hull. The captain craned his neck,
Damn.
then scanned the distance for the black ship's forward section. The Milky Way spanned the background with Orion shining brightly, and sure enough, he could see the damaged vessel drifting toward Aldebaran. The captain stood up with his mag boots squarely on the hull and gave them a whole arm flip of the bird. Amelia wrapped her arm around midsection teasingly.
Did that feel good?
He continued staring out.
Yeah, they probably can't see me anyway. I hope they float out there for the rest of their miserable short lives.
She urged him.
Come on, Atty. Let's finish this so we can leave their asses behind.
He smiled and replied.
When you put it that way.
Ben then shouted over the open comm.
Damn straight.
Atticus and Amelia exchanged a knowing glance, momentarily forgetting they were on a public channel. The knobs were shiny metal where they had been melted off, and that made them easy to weld to. Atticus held a rod by the side of one stanchion and said,
Give me a few tack welds.
Amelia hit the rod in 3 spots. The captain withdrew his hand and instructed.
Okay, go ahead.
He looked away as she beaded a line up and down the rod, and it became one with the stanchion. She welded a few more support rods in place, and then they slid the plate on. The captain looked underneath the plate.
Just wanted to make sure we have it on in the right direction.
He then looked up at her and smiled. She chuckled.
Yeah, they wouldn't last long otherwise.
He then asked Ben.
How close can we weld without damaging the plate?
After a tense pause, Ben's distorted voice answered,
Just don't let it touch directly. The plates can take some heat, but not direct exposure.
Atticus then queried.
Ben, why is your signal breaking up so badly?
Silence. Atticus asked.
Helen, what's going on?
Helen's voice, equally crackled, reported,
We're being scanned by the incoming ships. I assume they're trying to figure out what's happening.
Atticus pressed on.
Any change in their course or speed?
She replied,
No, still roughly 33 hours out.
Roger.
He acknowledged. Picking up another rod, Amelia said,
Okay, I'll weld this a few centimeters away from the plate so we can wedge in the spaces.
Atticus nodded. Once she completed the weld, they pressed in the spaces and tested the movement. The panel rotated, but almost no play.
Good. Now plug this one in and move on to the next. I sure wish we could run a test first.
After installing a second plate, the captain called for Ben again, but received no response.
Helen, can you relay a message to Ben? Ask him how it's coming along over there.
Helen replied,
Ben, or anyone on that wrecked ship, please respond.
Through heavy static, AJ's voice emerged.
I can hear you. They had me move halfway back to the ship to see if I could relay. They found some weapons lockers and a shuttle with some useful parts, but they will need help getting everything off.
Helen then relayed the update to the captain. Amelia nudged Atticus.
Atty, it's a good bet. A shuttle would have the grav drive plate control interface we need. If we can get that part, we will already have a balanced 4-plate thrust system.
Atticus looked over the plates they'd welded.
Right, Helen. We're coming over to help. Those parts are more urgent. Get AJ to wait for us, so he can lead the way.
Amelia and the captain returned to the Discretion and offloaded the welding gear. Inside, the brightness took a few seconds to adjust to, and the captain asked,
How much time do you have on air?
Checking her gauge, Amelia said.
About 4 hours.
The captain looked up at Helen, wincing a bit from the light.
We'll be back in 2 hours, and we'll eat while we refill our tanks. Let me know if anything changes.
With that, he pushed out of the hatch, followed closely by Amelia. They skimmed along the black beams of the Earth ship toward its remaining rear section. In awe, Amelia remarked,
Jesus, these ships don't look so big until you're right up against them.
As the crisscrossed beams passed and the stars twinkled behind, they finally reached the aft section, where Ben had previously cut a hatch. Atticus entered first, while Amelia peered over at the charred, tan wreckage of the Vigilant 100 meters below, its rear superstructure gaping like a ripped beer can. Atticus gestured,
Come on.
and as she pushed herself inside, the darkness swallowed her, until her eyes slowly adjusted. Then her helmet snagged on something. She tried to free it, only to feel that it had substance. Tilting her head back, she saw a frozen, bloodshot face staring back. She screamed, and Atticus whirled around, shoving the body away.
You okay?
he shouted. Nodding repeatedly, she managed,
Yeah, just startled the hell out of me.
Clutching onto Atticus with one arm, she steadied herself. Over the comm, AJ asked.
You guys all right? I heard a scream.
Atticus replied,
Yes, just startled by a dead crewman. We should reach you in a few minutes.
AJ then added.
Good. I'm really getting the creeps being alone in this ship.
Proceeding down a narrow passage toward the rear, Atticus commented,
Look, United States Homeworld Security, but with black patches. They should be gold.
Amelia inquired.
What does this SSD underneath mean?
Atticus shrugged.
I don't know. Never seen it before. Whoever they aren't standard military. Let's keep moving.
Their helmet lights illuminated the main passage, where only dim emergency lights offered scattered brightness. The vessel's interior still retained an air of precise orderliness from its previous life. Amelia pointed down the passage.
Look, it's AJ.
Atty grabbed her suit and yanked back, startling her again. He pointed to an inward-facing metal shard from a hull breach.
Careful not to snag your suit.
Ben's voice then came over the comm.
Good of you to join us. We've found most of what we need. And then some.
Atticus paused at a doorway and called,
Great to hear your voice. We're at AJ's location and we'll be there in a few minutes. By the way, any idea what SSD stands for on their uniforms?
Ben replied,
Not really. But judging by their ship and tech, they're an elite, well-funded unit. Perhaps Black Ops for the president or a senator. We even found warp communication probes, so their pockets run deep.
Quietly, AJ asked.
What are those?
Atticus smiled and said,
I'll tell you when we get back to the ship.
After navigating several more corridors, an open hatch led them into a large hangar area. The port side was exposed to space, with fragments of the Vigilant floating by, including a massive rocket nozzle as big as a small house, half embedded in what used to be a shuttlecraft. Ben emerged from the wreckage and waved. The three of them pushed off the wall toward the scattered debris, using their suit thrusters to slow down.
Hey, Ben, what have you got?
Atticus asked. Ben pointed to neatly stacked piles.
M24s with grenade launchers, ammo, AI probes, your grav plate control modules, one from this shuttle and one from that one over there, plus a pile of C7 explosives with remote detonators, brain scanners, relays, fuses, and even a whole case of chocolate. I was just about to cut the front off this shuttle to take the entire radar and sensor assembly too.
Atticus surveyed the find and exclaimed,
Chocolate? Okay, so how are we hauling all this back to the ship?
Amelia stepped forward and pointed at the massive breach in the hangar wall.
If we grab the drive control modules, we can simply bring the ship through the port breach and load up directly.
Atticus then playfully threw her a kiss
Brilliant.
before turning to Ben.
Great work. Where's Doc?
Ben pointed toward another shuttle.
All right, everyone, gather the modules and any parts you can carry, then head back. We'll retrieve the rest later. Doc, you copy?
Doc responded.
Yes, sir. Just grabbing medical supplies from this shuttle. I'll be there in a minute.
Amelia stuffed her pockets with modules and C7 explosives, picking up the case of detonators, while Ben secured an M24 and filled his pockets with ammo and more chocolate. Atticus and AJ each slung a rifle, and Atticus grabbed a brain scanner along with AI probes. AJ turned to get the box of relays when his rifle snagged on a jagged tube protruding from the rocket nozzle. In a split second, he instinctively yanked to free it, only for his right arm to slam into a shard of shrapnel that tore viciously across his suit. He halted, shock and pain pulsing from his arm.
Oh, shit.
He croaked. Atticus's voice cut through the chaos.
What?
He demanded, barely catching his breath. AJ, grimacing in pain, pressed his left hand desperately over the ragged slice, while his eyes pleaded silently for help and forgiveness. In an instant, Atticus abandoned all caution and lunged forward, seizing AJ with a fervor born of pure terror.
Help! He's punctured his suit!
He roared, clamping AJ's injured arm and pressing hard against the jagged wound as droplets of blood burst out and instantly froze in the vacuum.
AJ, pull your arm into your suit!
He demanded. AJ replied weakly.
It hurts. No, I can't. I'm trying.
Amelia's voice trembled with urgency.
Doc, do you have any kind of tape or something to seal a suit?
Doc snapped.
No, but get him over here. I've got O2 and this good shuttle still seals.
Ben's hands shook as he reached over and turned AJ's pressure valve. The suit hissed, re-inflating just enough before more blood and air blasted out in a violent spray. The captain's gaze hardened as he barked,
Grab this arm! Amelia and I will push. Let's get him over to the other shuttle.
They heaved AJ toward the starboard side of the mangled shuttle, muscles straining with raw determination as they braced for the desperate push-off. The captain counted down,
Ready? 1, 2, 3!
And all four of them rocketed across the hangar in a weightless, adrenaline-fueled dash toward salvation. Atticus's eyes darted to AJ's face. Inside his helmet, blood spattered like a macabre mural.
AJ! AJ! Come on, AJ! God damn it, AJ!
He shouted, his voice raw with desperation. Amelia's cry sliced through the panic.
Atty, brakes!
Atticus swiveled his head, eyes widening.
Shit! Fire in 2, 1!
Both of them fired their suit thrusters in a last-ditch attempt to slow the plummet. They slammed into the hatch door with a bone-jarring impact, teetering on the brink of tumbling over the edge. In a split-second decision, Doc grabbed them as they collided, yanking them down before they could hurtle any further. The team scrambled inside, slamming shut both the inner and outer hatches as the shuttle's engines roared to life. With trembling hands, Doc slammed the pressurization button, unleashing a rushing torrent of air that exploded into the cabin. They waited in agonizing silence while the cabin slowly came back to life. Through blood and a thick fog of condensation obscuring his view, Amelia strained to see AJ's face and instinctively wiped the grime away with her glove.
Atty, I can't see him.
She cried out, just as the cabin indicator finally flashed green, signaling that the air level was safe.
Help me get this suit off him.
Doc ordered, voice steady despite the storm of panic. They floated AJ into the center of the cabin as Doc began the careful removal of his helmet. A plume of fog burst from the seal as Doc clutched the base of AJ's neck. When AJ's head emerged, blood bubbled steadily from his nose. With clinical urgency, Doc ripped his glove off and reached around AJ's neck, his fingers searching for a pulse as the silence grew heavy, every second stretching the tension to its limit. The captain's voice finally broke the silence.
Doc?
Doc leaned forward, condensation beading on his helmet as the vapor danced in the dim light.
He's alive. I need to clear the blood from his nose. Now get this suit off so I can seal up his cut.
He commanded. The captain's anxiety spiked.
Where is all this blood coming from?
Doc tore a strip from AJ's torn shirt and pressed it against his face to soak up the crimson flow.
It's just a nosebleed. But in 0G, even that can be dangerous.
He grumbled grimly. As they began to peel away the suit, Ben's alarm screamed to life. Checking his gauge, his voice trembled.
Captain, I only have 30 minutes of air left.
The captain's eyes narrowed.
Doc, I assume you don't need all of us here.
Doc shook his head briskly while tearing AJ's bloody shirt sleeve in half as he worked. The captain issued orders, his tone razor-sharp.
Amelia, you and Ben head back to the ship. Forget everything else. Just get those control modules installed and bring the ship back here. And grab one of those air tanks in case you run into trouble.
Amelia exchanged a determined glance with Ben, nodding sharply with her head.
Aye, let's go.
She brushed AJ's face gently, a mix of sorrow and resolve, before pivoting to grab a spare O2 container. Together, they hurtled toward the airlock. Once inside, she asked,
Ben, you got everything you need?
He fumbled through his pockets, his voice laced with anxious humor.
I dropped most of what I had. Just the rifle, the ammo, and a couple of chocolate bars.
Pulling one out, as if it were a lucky charm.
I assume you have the control modules.
He added. She patted her pockets, confirming.
Yes.
With barely a moment's hesitation, they pushed off the shuttle, drifting toward the hatch they had entered through. Amelia glanced back at the other shuttle, her eyes catching the scattered supplies buffeted by the unforgiving void, modules and equipment strewn in every direction in a desperate bid to save AJ.
We'll have to round up all those supplies again when we return. I just hope nothing drifts out through that breach.
She murmured, tension thick in her voice. Ben's eyes narrowed.
Oh yeah. Nah, I don't think they'll drift too far.
Suddenly, another alarm burst over the comm as Ben's voice crackled with panic.
Crap! 15 minutes left! Am I using that much air? There's got to be a leak! I'm going to lower the pressure in my suit a bit!
The dire urgency in his words was the final, desperate note in a symphony of crisis as they drifted through the hangar bay. The captain's voice came through with a steely edge.
Hold steady, Ben. Amelia, watch him like a hawk.
Amelia fired her suit jets, her eyes narrowing as she maneuvered toward the hatch.
I will. And how's AJ?
She shouted over the roar. Doc's voice, strained yet urgent, responded,
I think he's going to be all right. Just a damaged arm. Should be able to regenerate, but he might be out for days.
Amelia exhaled a hard-won breath of relief.
Good. We're clearing the hangar hatch now. Be back in a short while with the ship.
Ben and Amelia tore through the corridor, urgency propelling them faster than they'd ever moved before. In less than 5 minutes, they reached the hatch Ben had hacked into. Ben glanced at her with a grim smirk.
Don't lose that air, all right?
She clutched the tank like a lifeline.
Not on your life.
Exactly,
He replied, and together they vaulted out, descending into the superstructure's labyrinth of girders and shadow. Then Helen's anxious voice lit up on the comms.
Hey, you guys, I was beginning to think something went wrong.
Amelia's tone sharpened with urgency.
Helen, AJ's injured, but Doc says he'll pull through. Ben's low on air.
Helen interrupted.
What do you mean? What happened? Are you going?
Amelia's voice cut through the static, louder now.
Helen, pressurize the cabin immediately. Ben is running on fumes. I'll fill you in once we're inside.
A heavy pause before Helen's acknowledgement came through. Amelia's eyes were watching structural cross members floating by, one by one, when suddenly something caught her attention.
Wait, what was that?
Ben snapped his head around.
What?
She pointed, voice trembling with shock.
I just saw a flash and sparks coming from...
Before she could complete the sentence, Ben grabbed her and thrusted both of them into a girder.
Muzzle flash, damn it! We're taking fire! Amelia, hold on!
She grabbed the girder desperately, with the arm still wrapped around the O2 tank, the other clinging to Ben. In response, he yanked the M24 from his back and racked up a burst of fire. The comms erupted into a cacophony of desperate voices until the captain bellowed,
Quiet, damn it. Ben, what's the situation?
Ben whirled around, his head snapping, as the rifle pivoted on the beam. A stray spark illuminated his visor.
We're under fire from small arms perched on the superstructure.
The muzzle flash reoccurred, forcing him to fire another burst. The recoil spun him around the beam, and in that heart-stopping instant, Amelia's grip faltered.
Shit! Don't let go!
Amelia screamed. Ben clutched the girder with his right hand, just as Amelia's hold slipped. Panic surged in her, and in her frantic reach, the O2 bottle slipped free. Snarling, Ben hauled himself back against the girders.
Whoa, that was a bad idea.
Amelia clambered back to him, panic edging every word.
I lost the bottle.
Ben's eyes tracked the drifting cylinder as it floated away. He checked his gauge, voice raw with urgency.
6 minutes. Captain, we're in deep shit here.
The captain's reply came in halting, static-laced bursts.
We are on our approach.
Ben barked into the comm.
Say again? I didn't copy that.
On way. Soon.
Came the mangled response.
Roger that.
Ben muttered.
I only caught one muzzle flash. Maybe it's just one guy. He's on the opposite side of the superstructure.
He eyed his gauge again.
5 minutes left. Amelia, get above me, but stay tucked behind the girder. I need a clear shot to at least return fire.
Amelia nimbly pulled herself up and against the girder, every muscle straining as she held herself to the girder's edge. Ben planted his feet inside the I-beam, peeking out from the side to aim his weapon. More muzzle flashes exploded in sequence, 3 rapid bursts, and on the third, Ben felt a harsh tug on his suit. He squeezed the trigger for a single shot. The recoil slammed him backward, and his grip shattered. Scrambling, he hit the thruster buttons and jerked back to the beam.
Shit! This isn't working!
His head spun, lightheadedness overtaking him, and his O2 alarm blared. Glancing at his gauge, he gasped.
0!
Frantic, he scanned for the spare tank. It was now floating a desperate 20 meters away. With a surge, he pushed off the girder and lunged. He collided with the tank in a bear hug frenzy. The rifle swung wildly, smacking the back of his helmet.
Ben!
Amelia screamed. Desperate, Ben fumbled for his emergency connect hose and tried to lock it onto the tank, but everything blurred. He muttered,
Damn it, This isn't... It won't...
Then a hand emerged from the chaos, snapping the connector on, while another activated the valve. Amelia's voice crackled through once more.
I got you, Ben.
She clutched him hard and blasted her suit thrusters toward the ship. Sparks and muzzle flashes lit up the floating dust and debris around them from deeper in the vessel.
Now, the captain's voice returned, adrenaline-fueled and raw.
Got the bastard? Get to the ship. I'm about to teach those sons of bitches a lesson they won't forget.
Amelia throttled back on the thrusters, the relief making her realize just how dangerously fast they were flying. She kicked into reverse, slowing their closing rate. As Ben's senses slowly reclaimed clarity, he managed a strained,
Thanks. I owe you one. That was way too close.
In that moment, the dark outline of the Discretion and its superstructure erupted in light. Both turned to witness the Earthship's power surging back.
Captain, is that you?
Ben called out.
Yes.
Came the terse reply. Then an intense white light appeared in the direction of Orion, and that's when Amelia saw traces of a beam coming from the rear of the Black Hulk they had just left. There were several flashes as the detached bridge of the black ship disintegrated under the intense heat of Atticus's laser fire. Then the blackness of the sky returned to normal as the sunlight glow faded.
Atty?
Amelia whispered, heart pounding. There was no answer. Together, Amelia and Ben drifted into the airlock, shutting the external door behind them. The sound of rushing air filled the confined space. The sound of the inner door banged stronger and wildly as the air filled the lock, and Helen's worried face appeared in the viewport.
You guys okay?
Ben flashed her a thumbs up. Helen's voice was clipped as she explained,
I set the inner pressure to only 40 kilopascals so you can get in as soon as the lock equalizes.
Thanks, Helen.
Amelia replied, and soon the lock lights shifted green, signaling safe entry. Ben finally removed his helmet, letting it drift free in the airlock, relief and exhaustion etched in every line of his face.
Man, it feels amazing to be out of that death trap. Christ, I'm starving!
He even pulled a chocolate bar from his pocket, cracking a wry smile. Amelia, still radioing as they entered discretion, tried reaching Atty again.
Atty, you there? You okay?
Atty's static-laced response came,
Yes, we're en route. Get those modules locked in. Can't leave AJ out too long.
Helen's once worried expression turned to one of horrified curiosity as she scanned Ben and Amelia for details.
He's fine.
Amelia assured.
AJ's in a pressurized shuttle. He's got a cut on his suit and his arm, but Doc says he'll be back on his feet in a few days.
Ben began carefully doffing his suit when Amelia stopped him with a pointed gesture.
No, we've still got to install these damn modules.
She fished something from her pocket.
And remember, the engine room's a vacuum.
His face fell as he exhaled a long, resigned breath.
All right, let's get this shit done.
With a grim chuckle, he shoved the rest of the chocolate into his mouth, securing his helmet once more. Testing the seal, he increased pressure by 5 kilopascals, only to watch it drop immediately.
Damn, I must have a leak somewhere.
His eyes flicked to the spare tank, its gauge stubbornly reading 10%.
Holy shit, I was close to being airless again.
Amelia leaned in, inspecting his suit with mounting alarm.
Oh my God! You've been hit!
Ben's surprise was palpable.
What? Where?
Amelia snorted despite the chaos.
It looks like you got shot right in the arse.
He twisted his body, trying to pinpoint the source of the damage, but it was futile. Amelia barked into the comm.
Captain, Ben's been shot. We need to get him out of his suit now.
Without missing a beat, the captain replied,
We're at the outer hatch. I'll be there in a second.
Ben removed his helmet, and as they carefully began unzipping his suit, he jerked suddenly.
Damn, felt that. Must be the adrenaline wearing off.
When the captain unlocked the inner hatch, he found Amelia suspended in mid-air behind Ben, holding his pants down as Ben wriggled around trying to inspect the damage. The captain's voice boomed with incredulous amusement.
What the hell is going on here? What kind of kinky crap are you pulling, Ben?
Suddenly, the absurdity hit them both. Even the captain couldn't help but burst into laughter. Doc squeezed past the others.
Let me take a look.
Sure, why not? Everyone gather around and get a good view of my ass.
Ben joked as a small crowd formed behind him. He plucked another chocolate bar from his pocket with a rueful grin. Doc produced his regenerator from his pouch.
It's just a graze. Hold still. I'm fixing it.
The captain cut in firmly.
All right. Enough ass gawking. Amelia, you're with me. Let's get those modules installed now.
Doc slammed the regenerator against Ben's battered skin.
It's going to hurt like hell for a few days, but you'll pull through,
he growled. Ben shot a cocky glance over his shoulder, his mouth stuffed with melting chocolate.
Thanks, Doc. I'm heading to the galley.
With a swift tug of his trousers, he propelled himself forward like a bullet, heading toward the mess. Meanwhile, Amelia and Atticus burst into the engine room and peered fiercely through the hatch portal.
We're gonna have to seal this deck, depressurize the whole thing.
Amelia's eyes hardened.
All right, I'll shut the stairway hatch.
With determined precision, she soared up the stairs and yanked the hatch down, sealing it like a coffin.
Helen? Can you bleed the pressure from the engineering deck?
Helen's reply crackled through with urgency.
Working on it now.
As the gauge hit zero, Atticus flung open the engine room hatch.
Ben, do we need any special maneuvers here?
Silence.
Ben?
Then Helen's voice popped over the comm.
He's holed up in the galley stuffing his face. Try your in-head comm.
Atticus gritted his teeth and summoned his thoughts with force.
Call Ben.
Ben's voice in his head, his tone irreverent.
I love these implanted comm links, talking and eating at the same time. You in the engine room?
Atticus's stomach rumbled as hunger gnawed him.
Damn it, Ben, focus! Stop bombarding me with the image of that damn chicken.
Ben's mental chuckle was relentless.
Sorry, but it's too damn good.
Atticus shook off the distraction. With measured intensity, he seized the precise set of cables, ripped out two connectors, and yanked out the old module, its surface oddly unscathed despite the chaos. Glancing at Amelia, he thought,
This is one. It looks intact.
She stared at him, finally asking,
What?
He cursed under his breath for trying to think to her. Clicking the mic, he demanded,
Amelia, is this the one? It appears fine.
Ben's inner laughter pulsated through the link. Her reply was curt, edged.
Yes, they got fried on the inside. There was a power surge when the plates vaporized.
With a swift move, she withdrew a new module from her pocket and floated it over to him. A few brutal minutes later, both the port and starboard modules were replaced.
Helen, confirm engine status now.
She replied through gritted teeth.
Scanning. Hey, I see 4 plates on the starboard side shining green. The port side shows 2 plates that are yellow, and 2 spots are flashing red.
Atticus transmitted this to Ben, whose response echoed in Atticus's mind.
Check the breakers here.
Atticus drifted to the other end of the engine room and yanked open the breaker panel. His hands raced over the switches, guided by Ben's mental commands.
Bingo. Several breakers have popped. Should I just reset them?
Ben's mental nod echoed. One by one, Atticus reset them. Suddenly, the room blazed red. Ben's thoughts rushed in.
It's all right. Just a depressurization alarm. Tell Helen to switch it off.
Helen's voice wavered over the radio.
We are getting a depressurization alarm.
Atticus barked.
Turn it off. It's from before. What do the panels show now?
Helen exhaled.
Oh? Whew. Okay. 4 steady green lights on the port side, and the 2 new starboard panels are flashing green.
Amelia's relieved grin broke the tension.
We nailed it. Just need to recalibrate the new starboard panels.
She pulled Atticus into a fierce embrace. The captain's voice thundered,
Excellent! We're coming back in. Time to fetch AJ.
The captain and Amelia sealed the airlock behind them and surged toward the engine control display on the bridge, discarding their helmets with a clatter. Amelia set hers on the panel edge, but it defiantly floated away.
Everything looks good. Let's test it. Everyone brace yourselves.
With grim determination, she powered up the modules. The transition alarm went off, and 30 seconds later, she had panel control. Ben came out of the galley and joined them. Amelia tapped the control for the 4 starboard engines, and she applied the smallest thrust she could. The ship lurched and strained against the grapples attached to the Vigilant, and she shut them down.
Those are good. Okay, let's try the new ones.
The ship jerked hard, and everyone heard the grapple cables bang under the strain. She shut them down.
Well, that was weird. They're all working, but those new panels are definitely putting out more thrust for the same amount of power. That might help us. Maybe we won't need to put all 4 of the panels on, and since one of the connectors is destroyed anyway, that would fix that problem.
The captain issued the next command.
Unhook and grab AJ.
Ben slid over and retracted the auto-grapplers.
We're free.
Amelia's voice rang out, steely and resolute.
Everyone, hold on. It's showtime.
She set the port panels to minimum for 1 second, turning them away from the superstructure. Then, with calculated precision, she set both sides to minimum, and the craft glided away from the wreckage, though the Discretion veered stubbornly to starboard. Increasing power on the starboard panels, she forced it to straighten.
All right, I think I've got it. I'm telling the computer that at this level, both sides are equal power. With no thrusters, we have to rely on differential thrust and the starboard engine's gimbal to steer.
The captain's skepticism cut through the tension.
You really think you can maneuver her into that gaping hull breach like this?
Her eyes blazed.
Let's find out.
With a defiant twist, she turned the ship 180 degrees, halted their drift relative to the wreck, and steadily applied thrust toward the hangar breach. The Discretion slipped gracefully into the breach.
Ben, fire the grapple hooks.
Ben's fingers danced over the panel as the hooks launched, and the crew felt a subtle deceleration as the cables snapped taut.
We're in,
Amelia declared, adrenaline-laced. Atticus pressed a tender kiss on her forehead before pivoting toward the hatch.
Come on, Doc. We're off to grab AJ and those damn supplies.
Atticus and Doc descended to the deck adjacent to the shuttle with military precision. They flung open the hatch and propelled themselves into the airlock, where the familiar rush of air collided with unexpected, blaring music. The airlock indicator flashed green, and they pulled themselves into the ship. AJ had commandeered one of the pilot's chairs, unleashing blaring rock music that roared through the cabin.
AJ, you all right?
Bellowed the Doc. AJ jolted upright, surprise contorting his face. He struck the stop button and groaned in a strained, disoriented tone.
My arm's killing me, and every joint screams like they're on fire.
The Doc inspected him, his touch both urgent and gentle.
You've got a bad case of the bends from that sudden decompression. I'll patch you up once we're back aboard. Can you get into your suit?
AJ eyed his suit with apprehension.
What about my arm?
The captain interjected sharply.
Tuck your arm into the suit. We'll seal it off. It won't be comfortable, but it'll only be a few minutes.
AJ nodded reluctantly, unbuckled the restraints, and clumsily pushed off the chair. As he slid his legs into the suit, bending his arms brought a piercing howl.
Ah, damn it, that hurts.
Doc helped him, asking urgently,
Your joints or the cut?
AJ's pained reply.
Both, man, both.
Soon, AJ stood in the suit, with his right arm tucked inside and the suit arm limply floating. The captain swiftly removed the suit's right arm, releasing a micro-seal.
There. These suits are built for exactly this kind of trouble. They have a full set of detachable appendages, including the head, though I don't see why you'd ever need that one.
AJ managed a weak smile as the captain handed him his severed suit arm.
Keep this. Doc, grab whatever med supplies you need and let's haul him back to the ship.
Helen's keen ears caught the outer hatch sliding open, and she swiftly propelled herself over. Banging on the glass, she waved frantically.
AJ, I'm so damn glad you're okay.
Atticus hurried out to re-secure the outer hatch. AJ drifted to the porthole, his face lighting up as he spotted his aunt.
Me too.
When the hatch indicator flashed green, Helen swung open the door and swept him into a tight hug. AJ's cry of agony reverberated as she released him.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Are you all right?
He recoiled.
Everything really hurts, and I just want to get this suit off.
Amelia and Ben rushed over, their urgency matching his pain, and together they peeled the suit away. Doc spoke to Ben.
Hand me the med kit on the wall there.
Ben looked around the hatch and grabbed the kit off the wall.
Here you go, Doc.
Doc opened the kit and pulled out a silvery bag, which he ripped open to reveal a small injector.
AJ, let me see your arm. This will make your DCS symptoms fade and help your body to reabsorb the nitrogen.
AJ meekly put his left arm up.
What's a DCS?
Doc injected him.
The bends. You have the bends from the depressurization.
As AJ stepped through the inner hatch, Ben cocked an eyebrow.
You hungry?
AJ paused, a pained smile cracking through.
Yeah, very hungry.
Come on, I'll cook you something while we wait for the captain and Doc.
Ben said, with relief in his voice. Ben, AJ, and Helen went into the galley, and Ben explained about what happened after AJ's suit incident. Back at the controls, Amelia sank into her chair with exhaustion etched on her face. In an instant of distracted haste, she inhaled a shard of floating glass. Coughing violently, she spat it out.
Jesus Christ, what the hell is happening today?
As she fought to regulate her breathing, as her adrenaline subsided, memories of the day's chaos overwhelmed her. Her thoughts cascaded to her lost husband, and tears bubbled up in front of her eyes. She tried to stifle her grief, but failed miserably. Just then, Atticus reappeared at the outer hatch to toss more supplies into the outer airlock. Drifting in with a box of ammunition, he stole a glance through the inner porthole and witnessed Amelia, all alone at the con, clad in her pressure suit, her tears covering her eyes and droplets floating around her face, her helmet floating a half-meter above her. His heart twisted. There wasn't anything he hated worse than seeing his Amelia unhappy, but he didn't know what to do. He wanted to bang on the door, but he didn't want to take the chance of upsetting her more. At that moment, Helen burst in.
Amelia, are you all right?
Amelia turned, tears flying away from her face, her eyes locking on Atticus's face in the portal. Atticus jerked back as she stared at him, expression numb, until Helen's presence eclipsed the painful moment. Reluctantly, Atticus withdrew, pushing himself out the hatch to grab more supplies, his mind a battleground of turmoil as he struggled to focus on the task at hand. An hour later, the captain and Doc found themselves crammed inside the airlock with supplies piled up from wall to wall. When the inner hatch was opened, Ben and Helen were waiting for them. Atty removed his helmet and surveyed the area toward the con. He glanced at Helen, who remarked,
She's lying down.
Atty pursed his lips and gave a slight nod, his hair disheveled, as if caught in an explosion at a straw factory. Ben asked,
We ready to leave, Captain?
Atticus took a moment to process the question before replying,
Not yet. There's one more thing we need to do. Now that I've restored power to that thing.
he said, pointing toward the rest of the black ship.
Do you think we can reactivate the jamming signal to cover our tracks?
Ben nodded.
Yeah, good idea. I wish I had a suit. I'd go with you.
Atticus gave Ben's belly a playful slap.
Well, if you stopped eating all that chicken, maybe you'd fit into a normal suit.
Fuck you, old man.
Ben retorted, and the two shared a grin. The captain then turned and said,
You have command now. Get her flight ready, and I'll be back as soon as I can.
Ben quickly caught the captain's arm and asked,
Have you checked your air supply lately?
The captain glanced at his gauge. 34 minutes. Muttering,
Crap. Looks like I need more.
he set his helmet aside and turned.
Want to just swap out my pack?
Ben nodded.
All right, let me grab a fresh one, and I'll take this one down to recharge.
While waiting, the captain checked the sensors. He could see 2 ships, roughly 4 days out behind them, but nothing else. When Ben returned with the new pack, he asked,
Any contacts?
The captain turned away from Ben while speaking.
No, I can't see anything. Being inside this hangar.
Ben fitted the new pack.
There. Test that.
The captain put on his helmet and repressurized.
Looks good. The gauge now reads 8 hours, 12 minutes.
They opened and then shut the inner hatch again. Ben watched through the port glass.
Be safe,
He called, and the captain replied.
Will do. I'll be back soon.
The outer hatch opened, and the captain propelled himself out, sealing it behind him. About 90 minutes later, everyone's brain TC implants began malfunctioning, forcing them to switch the devices off. Amelia awoke from a fitful sleep, her implant's shrill scream jolting her upright. She slammed her finger against her temple until the device powered down, her breath hitching as silence returned. Her eyes darted around the dim quarters, struggling to anchor herself. Then her gaze fell on a small, hollow frame by her bunk. A frozen image of Bert laughing, his eyes crinkling under a Martian sunset. The memory hit like a physical blow, his warm hand brushing her cheek, promising they'd make it through her leaving for this mission. Just come back to me, he'd said. Her chest tightened, and a sob tore free, raw and unstoppable. She clutched the pillow, screaming into it, her fists pounding the mattress as if she could beat away the truth. He's gone. Because of me. On the bridge, Ben glanced at Helen and Doc. Both had their fingers pressed just above their ears and announced,
There we go. The captain must have found the jamming signal.
Then he reached up and turned off his own implant. A minute later, Ben heard the outer hatch open, and he went to the hatch window to look out. Atticus flashed him a thumbs up as the airlock filled with a rushing whoosh of air. When the lock turned green, Ben opened the inner hatch.
Welcome back. I see you managed to get the jamming signal back on.
Atticus shoved the helmet into Ben's hands, his voice tight with urgency.
Found the damn jamming program, buried on the last screen I checked after an hour of slogging through menus. Pure luck. Now let's move. Replot for EO, stat, and get us out of this hangar. Where's Amelia?
Ben, already turning to the nav console, paused, his tone softer.
Her quarters. Probably still out cold.
Atticus nodded, clapping Ben's shoulder, but his jaw tightened. He strode down the corridor, boots clanging on the Discretion's scarred deck. The ship's hum, a faint pulse under the fading adrenaline. At her door, he stripped off his gloves, fingers stiff from gripping controls. He raised a fist to knock, but a muffled sob stopped him cold. Taking a deep breath, he opened the door. Amelia looked up, tears drifting in 0G like tiny, glinting stars. The sight gutted him, her strength, always a beacon, now fractured. He grabbed a towel from the sink rack, crossing the small space in 2 steps.
Hey,
He murmured. voice rough but gentle as he knelt beside her. The towel brushed her cheek, catching the floating tears, her skin warm under his touch. Her voice broke, sharp with anguish.
It's not okay. My Bert is dead. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have been with you. None of this would have happened.
She shoved him back, but her hands lingered on his chest, torn between rage and need. He pulled her close, and she collapsed into his embrace, her sobs muffled against his suit. She hugged him despite his bulky spacesuit, crying,
I must look like an awful mess.
He looked down at her and said,
No, not at all. Don't worry about it. It's okay.
Not knowing what else to say, he embraced her tighter and murmured,
I know. I'm sorry. And I love you more than anything.
She started to yell again. But then, seeing the sincere look on his face and the grimace that warned her of his hurt, she abruptly slowed down. She wanted to scream, yet deep down, she knew she loved him too.
Atty, I don't know.
Then Ben's voice came over the intercom.
Course plotted and we're ready.
The captain and Amelia stared at each other for a few seconds before she closed her eyes, took in a deep breath, and said,
Let's go.
She grabbed the towel from him, wiped her face, and motioned him onward.
Just give me a minute, and I'll be there.
Atticus managed a half smile, heart aching.
That's my girl.
He pushed off toward the bridge, pausing at her door to cast a worried glance back. She met his eyes and said, Go. Once he reached the bridge, Ben apologized.
Sorry, Captain, for interrupting, but we really need to move.
No, Ben. You did right. We don't have time for long emotional moments now. Amelia's coming up. Help me get this suit off.
A minute later, Amelia flew onto the bridge and slid into the pilot's seat without a word. She immediately activated the grav drives, triggering the usual warning alarm. Everyone had been watching her progress, but the alarm made them scramble to secure themselves. 30 seconds later, the ship executed a rapid 180-degree rotation and then stopped. Then, all the plates fired simultaneously, pushing them out through the hangar's breach. The captain considered speaking, but chose to remain silent. The ship then rotated another 90 degrees to starboard as she cranked the plates to full power. Everyone crushed back into their seats as the clamor of crashing pans and silverware echoed from the galley. Ben exchanged a wide-eyed look with Atticus, but said nothing. The captain shifted his gaze to the rear-view camera and saw the wreckage quickly vanish, swallowed by the dominating light of the sun. After a few control adjustments, Amelia set the acceleration to maximum, then rose from her seat. She glanced at Atty before returning to her quarters, quietly closing and locking the door behind her. Ben leaned over to the captain.
Whoa! That was pretty scary.
Atticus opened his eyes wide, nodding in agreement. The captain then took the pilot's seat that Amelia had just left and glanced back at Helen and Doc, who were heading to the galley. A jay called out,
I'll go help too.
as he sprinted off. The captain announced,
All right. Looks like we're on our way to Io. That jamming signal should cover our escape for a while. I mean, take a look. I'm not picking up any traces on the sensors. Not even the wreckage we just left.
Ben settled into the co-pilot's chair.
Yeah, I'm not getting any signals either. No radio, no beacons, not even the radar emissions those corporate ships were pushing out.
The captain surveyed the ship and said,
What a goddamn mess.
Ben chuckled and replied.
Well, we've got 20 days to clean it all up.
Atticus grunted.
I don't know if that'll be enough time. But first, we all need to eat and rest. Well, except for you. You've already had plenty. Speaking of which, is there any of that chicken left?
Ben laughed.
Yeah, I saved some for you in the fridge, and there's more in cold storage.
The captain stood up.
I don't think there's more I can do up here, but I'm feeling a bit lightheaded. I don't know if it's lack of food or low oxygen. Let's repressurize the cabin to full pressure.
Ben acknowledged, and the captain returned to the galley. Inside, Helen, Doc, and AJ were busy tidying up and sweeping what looked like salt remnants. The captain commanded,
Hey, drop everything. Sit down and have some food. Let's all rest for the next 12 hours.
They complied and sat at the table. The captain turned to AJ, noticing the boy wince.
How are you doing, AJ?
He replied,
Okay, my arm hurts like a son of a bitch, but Uncle Travis fixed my joints.
The captain then looked at Doc.
Can you give him something for that?
Doc replied,
Yes, sir. He had quite a bit of nerve damage in his arm. I did my best to repair it, and it's healing. I just didn't want to give him something too strong and knock him out until everything calmed down, but I'll give him a dose now.
Atticus lurched toward the fridge, but Helen's hand caught his arm.
Sit, Captain. I've got this.
Her voice was warm but firm, a mother's tone that brooked no argument. Exhaustion crashed over him like a gravity surge. He sank into the galley chair, the Discretion's hum a dull pulse in his bones.
Thanks, Helen.
He mumbled, eyes half closed. Helen bustled at the counter, the sizzle of chicken fajitas and the sweet tang of corn soup filling the air. Atticus's head lolled, sleep tugging at him until a plate clinked down, jolting him awake. The aroma, spiced meat, warm corn, hit like a lifeline.
Smells like paradise,
He said, a tired smile breaking through. Helen served Doc, Ben, and AJ, then sat with her own plate. She glanced at the empty chair beside Atticus.
Amelia?
I'll take hers.
He said, voice low, the weight of her absence settling in his chest. Helen's brow creased, her fork pausing.
I'm worried about her, Addie.
He nodded, jaw tight.
She's tough. Tougher than me, maybe. But yeah, I'm worried too.
His attempt at a grin didn't reach his eyes, and Helen's small, knowing smile mirrored his concern as she resumed eating. Atticus finished his meal, the flavors grounding him. He piled a fresh plate with a fajita, and Helen, quick on her feet, poured a steaming cup of soup.
For her.
She said, pressing it into his hands. He nodded, grateful, and headed down the corridor, the ship's scarred walls a reminder of their recent hell. At Amelia's door, he shifted the plate to one hand and knocked softly. No answer. The soup's warmth seeped through the cup, steadying him. He tried the knob, locked. Another knock, and the door cracked open. Amelia's face appeared, tear-streaked, eyes hollow in the dim light. She saw the food and sagged, letting the door drift wide.
Not hungry.
She whispered, curling back onto her bunk, her voice a ghost of its usual fire. Atticus stepped inside. He tried to pull a chair close, but its magnetic lock seized, jerking the soup from his grip.
Damn it.
He muttered, licking his burning finger, his frustration flaring. Amelia's hand grazed his waist, her touch a quiet plea.
Atty, just lie with me.
Her voice cracked, raw with need, and his heart twisted. Her pain, her warmth, pulling him in despite the shadow of Bert's memory. He set the plate on a shelf, kicking off his corn-flecked boots. As he moved, Doc passed the open door, his eyes meeting Atticus's in silent understanding. Without a word, Doc reached in, pulling the door shut with a soft click. Atticus eased onto the bunk, the mattress creaking under his weight. Amelia drew his arm across her, pressing it to her chest, her grip fierce as if anchoring herself against a void. Her tears dampened his sleeve, and he breathed her in, sweat, grief, and that faint jasmine scent she always carried.
I love you.
he whispered, voice rough, holding her close as the ship's hum cocooned them. She didn't reply, but her fingers tightened on his, a silent vow. In that moment, the galaxy's chaos faded, and it was just them. Two souls, scarred but unbroken, clinging to each other in the dark. When the captain awoke, Amelia was gone. Sliding across the bed, he noticed his pants and the food were missing. Shifting into a sitting position, he looked down to find his left foot cold, with only one sock remaining. Leaving his quarters, he staggered down the corridor until he heard voices from the galley.
Good afternoon, Captain.
Peeking around the corner, he saw everyone gathered for what looked like dinner. Running his fingers through his hair, he asked.
How long have I been out?
Ben replied.
Oh, about 17 hours.
Taking a deep breath, the captain said.
I feel like hell.
Ben joked.
And you sure look it.
Helen interjected.
Captain, put on some damn pants. There are children on this boat.
And quickly covered AJ's eyes. Laughter erupted around the table. Atticus looked down.
Oh shit, sorry. Wait, where the hell are my pants?
Amelia turned and handed him his now clean pants. He smiled gently.
Thank you.
And she kissed his cheek, returning his smile. After dinner, the captain, Ben, and Amelia headed to the bridge for a quick status check. Amelia settled into the pilot's seat, and the captain took the co-pilot's chair, with Ben squeezing in between. Amelia spoke.
I was afraid of this. We're off course by more than 4 degrees. The 4 panels on starboard are outputting slightly more power than the 2 new ones, which isn't always the case. When I set them up yesterday, they were balanced. Either way, if we had a 3rd panel on the port side, we could push both sides to a higher thrust.
The captain pondered for a moment.
Well, since all the sensors are still useless, and no one has deactivated the jamming signal, we could shut the engines down, install the 3rd panel, and then get underway again.
Looking at her display, Amelia added,
With the extra thrust, we definitely make up for the time lost in course correction and the extra hour or 2 spent on installing the panel.
The captain turned to Ben.
Up for another spacewalk?
Ben replied.
Actually, I am. With Doc's help, I fixed the hole in my suit. I recharged all the packs we used yesterday, though I still haven't mended AJ's.
An hour later, suited up again, the captain walked up behind Amelia and asked,
You ready?
She looked up, nodded, and the captain hit the intercom.
Everyone, get ready for 0G. We're shutting down the engines. Ben and I are going back out to install the 3rd panel.
He released the intercom button, gently rested a hand on Amelia's shoulder, and whispered,
Okay, shut them down.
The 30-second alarm began. As Atticus and Ben exited the airlock with the new panel and equipment in tow, the sun shone directly in Ben's face.
The sun sure is looking small. I always feel a bit uneasy being so far from its warmth,
he remarked. Atticus squinted.
But it's still bright as hell.
They rounded the ship's edge, being careful to place their magnetic boots securely on the curved hull. They neared the plate and thruster nozzle hidden on the underbelly. Atticus pointed.
There, we're installing the plate there. At least we'll have full sunlight, considering the ship's current attitude.
As they neared a partially melted stanchion, the captain suddenly exclaimed,
Shit! Look!
While pointing to one of the plates he and Amelia had installed.
The rods have bent under the strain. Amelia?
Her response, tinged with static, came over the comm.
I copied that. You'll have to reinforce them. That means we'll be shut down for a little longer. I'm switching on the internal plating so we can clean up inside.
The captain paused.
Roger that.
For about 3 hours, Ben and the captain worked diligently to install the new plate and shore up the others. Finally, the captain clicked his radio.
Okay, Amelia. I think we're done. We're coming back.
She replied,
Good. We managed to tidy the place up. Hopefully, we won't be inhaling any more glass shards either.
The captain tilted his head.
Amelia, can you repeat that entire sentence?
She questioned.
Why? Didn't you copy it?
He answered,
No, I mean, yes, that's the point. It was crystal clear.
In a raised voice, she declared.
The jamming. It stopped.
The captain hurriedly.
We're coming in now.
The captain and Ben quickly loaded everything into the airlock, pulling it shut in haste. They stood on the floor, readjusting to gravity as they waited for the lock to repressurize. Once the airlock reached 40 kilopascals and turned green, they removed their helmets. Ben asked,
Ready to go to full pressure?
The captain nodded reluctantly, and the pressure slowly increased. They sat in silence, their ears popping as they equalized. Through the portal, the captain observed Amelia at the controls, visibly frustrated by the slow pressurization. Although it was shorter than the time required for depressurization on a spacewalk, it felt agonizing compared to their earlier haste. Over the comm, Amelia said,
Atty, I'm picking up ships again, along with hints of gamma rays. There must be one hell of a firefight going on back there.
The captain began pacing.
Come on already!
Then the lock turned green once more, and he immediately opened the hatch. He tripped over welding equipment, nearly falling forward, but managed to steady himself before slamming into the back of Amelia's chair. The jolt sent Amelia forward. She exchanged a quick look with Ben before glancing at Atty. He clenched his fist and shook it at the airlock silently before returning his gaze to the console.
What's the situation?
He asked. Amelia pointed at the display.
It looks like some of the Earth ships have joined up with some of the Corp ships, and they're duking it out. There are even more ships arriving from over here and there.
Suddenly, the screen filled with static and garbled data. After a moment, the captain realized.
The jamming signal is back up. No doubt the Earth ships are using it against the corporate ship again. Good. Let's move while they're blind and confused.
He hit the intercom.
We're turning the engines back on, disabling the internal plating. Get ready.
Then he looked at Amelia.
Do it.
Chapter 3. The Run to Io. Whom do I flee? What can the cargo be? To kill the big three, just to get at me. 2 days later, the captain rapped on Amelia's door. She softly replied,
Come in.
and as he opened it, he saw her setting aside a framed photograph of her husband. Turning around mid-wipe, she greeted him with a quiet,
Hi.
Glancing at her, he felt a surge of sympathy, but instead just remarked.
The jamming signal. It stopped again.
Taking a deep breath, she rose and followed him to the bridge. Once there, she adjusted the passive sensor suite settings, and a fleet of ships came into view.
I'd normally say that's one of the Earth ships pursuing us. But notice behind it countless radar echoes that aren't accelerating. There's no relative difference in Doppler shift between them, which makes me think they're all disabled or destroyed. Also, several more corporation ships are coming from this direction, seemingly trying to cut off the Earth ship, though it's accelerating too rapidly for them to catch it.
Atticus zoomed the display out and asked.
What about it catching us?
Amelia pressed a button on the display, which revealed the relative speeds and accelerations.
He's out accelerating us, but only slightly.
Will he be able to catch us before we reach Io?
If we keep our current acceleration and they do the same? No, provided we don't overshoot our rendezvous point. We'll have to start breaking in.
She calculated quickly.
At most, 9 days from now. Our 3-day head start gives us some leeway.
The captain pondered aloud.
But wouldn't they also have to start braking too, or risk overshooting us?
Ben scratched his head and replied,
Well, they might fire on us as they speed by. Who knows how accurate their lasers are at tracking targets or what range they have?
Focusing more intently, Amelia then declared,
Captain, I had the computer run some simulations. If the Earth ship decelerates along with us to try to match our speed close and be close enough to fire, the corporate ships will catch up to it. That means it must maintain a delicate balance, fast enough to avoid them, yet slow enough that it can fire on us. I asked the computer to calculate the ideal scenario for the Earth ship.
The captain and Ben listened closely.
Go on.
They prompted. She explained,
If we slam our brakes in 9 days, the corporate ships would need to react in 13 days. In that case, they'd intercept us in 18 days, but they'd barrel past Io Station with so much momentum that it would take them over a week to turn around. However, if they don't decelerate at all, they'd catch us in about 14 days.
Ben then asked,
So, if the Earth ship breaks with us aiming to meet at Io Station, when do the corporate ships close in on it?
After running further numbers, she responded,
If the corporate ships maintain full speed while the Earth ship decelerates, they'd catch up in roughly 15 days. This means the Earth ship needs to maintain its acceleration for as long as possible.
The captain slumped into the co-pilot's seat and mused.
What if we alter course toward the far side of Jupiter to perform some aerobraking? We could extend our acceleration period before needing to slow down.
Amelia hesitated.
Aerobraking with this hunk of junk? In our current condition? No way. I doubt the ship can handle that much stress. Besides, we'd have to rotate the drive plates away from the atmosphere, or they'll tear off, especially with our jury-rigged setup. And that would defeat the purpose. While combining aerobraking with gravitational deceleration could help, substituting one for the other won't.
Frustration laced the captain's voice.
Crap. Any ideas, Ben?
Ben shrugged.
You two are the geniuses here. I just keep the ship running. You two come up with ways to break it.
The captain grinned as he looked down at the deck, and Amelia returned his smile warmly. Straightening up, Amelia interjected,
Wait. If we can't use the atmosphere, there is something else from Jupiter we could use.
The captain leaned in, waiting eagerly.
Well?
Raising her hand, she paused.
Hold on. Thinking.
She pulled up displays of Jupiter's and Io's magnetic fields. Atticus leaned over her shoulder, trying to decipher her idea. After a moment, she turned to him, nearly colliding with his head in her excitement. Recoiling slightly, she nudged him back and said,
All right. Here's the idea. Jupiter has an enormous magnetic field, and we've got 2 MFGs on board. Why did we bring a second one in the first place?
Ben piped in.
To shield us from Io's ion stream.
She nodded.
Exactly. And that ion stream circles Io's orbit entirely. So if we inject into Io's orbit on Jupiter's far side and loop around, we can use the magnetic field as additional brakes. Its intensity is tremendous, so it should really make a difference. Initially, we were aiming directly for Io and planned to brake there. But circling around and employing the magnetic field might allow us a day extra of acceleration before we have to turn and slow down.
The captain stared at Amelia in amazement.
Damn. I love you. You're brilliant. Do you have precise measurements?
She smiled softly.
I'm good, but not all-knowing. I still need to run a lot of calculations and see if I can get current field strength data from IO Station. I'll collaborate with Ben on configuring the MFGs and have something ready by tomorrow.
Atticus then gently cupped her face and kissed her. The sight warmed him. It was wonderful to see her so happy, even if only for a moment. The rest of the day, Ben and Amelia dove deep into the problem, with AJ silently trailing them around like a puppy. Meanwhile, Atticus alternated between eavesdropping on their discussions, monitoring sensor readings, and munching on junk food in the galley. That evening, while Atticus slept in his bunk, the door creaked open. Amelia stepped in and closed it quietly behind her.
Can I lie with you?
She asked softly. He opened his eyes and watched her features emerge in the dim light.
Of course.
He replied, scooting over to make space. As she slipped off her shoes and unzipped her jumpsuit, letting it fall to the floor, she then pulled her tank top over her head. Atticus noted the soft glow from his bedside display highlighting the lower part of her breasts and saw her nipples harden in the cool air. She bounced on her socks to remove them, then shed her panties and jumped into the bed.
Atty, can you cuddle with me? In the naked way? I just want to feel your warmth next to mine.
She whispered. Atticus discarded his undershirt and tossed his underwear aside.
Sure,
he said. As she nestled her bare back against him, the cool contact sent shivers down his spine. He wrapped an arm around her, caressing her breast, and offered tentatively,
Do you want to?
Before he could finish, she interrupted,
Not tonight, Atty. I'm sorry. I just need to feel safe and held right now. I feel you, but I'm really not ready.
He murmured into her ear,
I love you, and being with you is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Please don't apologize. Making you happy is all that matters.
She turned, kissed him tenderly, and pulled him into a tight embrace before tearfully admitting,
I love you too.
In the morning, Atty awoke to find Amelia missing. On the floor lay her tank top and panties, but her jumpsuit was nowhere to be seen. Just then, the door swung open and Amelia entered brightly.
You're awake. I made some French toast and fresh orange juice.
Atty sat up, eagerly awaiting the delicious aroma as she gently placed the tray on his lap. He asked,
What about you?
Smiling, she sat beside him.
I already had mine.
He forked a bite of toast into his mouth,
Delicious.
and with his free hand, playfully pinched her butt through her jumpsuit. She giggled and said,
Eat up there. We've got a big day planned.
Grabbing her clothes from the floor, she hopped up, and as she headed toward the door, she turned back teasingly.
Hey, Atty.
She had unzipped her jumpsuit, causing him to leap in surprise as the plate of toast slid across the tray. He lunged to save it, but by time he did, he looked up to see her laughing merrily while disappearing down the corridor.
Hey, that's not fair!
He called after her. Just then, Ben popped his head in.
Having fun this morning, Captain? Come on, get your ass out of bed. We've got ideas.
The captain chuckled.
I am. Just a second. Gotta find my clothes.
About 10 minutes later, he arrived on the bridge, his hair in tousled disarray, to find Amelia sitting there. Her gorgeous straight red hair fell perfectly around her shoulders. She wore a cobalt blue top with 2 rows of buttons, the top one undone and the flap casually revealing her cleavage. Atty gulped at the sight, thinking,
Damn, she's stunning this morning.
Noticing his open-mouthed expression, when Ben looked away for a second, she playfully pulled her blouse forward, while Attie's eyes widened in amusement and delight. Ben looked back, eyes questioning.
What? What's gotten into you two today?
They both chuckled as Amelia pressed buttons and pointed at the sensor display.
All right. So after reviewing Ben's measurements on the MFG power outputs and the latest magnetic field data from Io and Jupiter, I built this model. If we alter course within the next 12 hours, we can easily intercept this segment of Io's charged toroid ahead of the Moon. With both MFG units at full power, it should decelerate us enough to swing around Jupiter for an insertion for Io's orbit and grant us an extra day of acceleration. That would mean the Earthship, assuming it doesn't pursue us and instead predicts Io as our destination, would only intercept us 2 hours before we reach Io. Interestingly, at that point, we'll be flying back at them.
Attie laughed.
Damn, that's close. Is there any way to boost our power to shave off those 2 hours? Or, wait, add to them, so we're farther from Io when they pass us? Man, this is getting complicated.
At that moment, AJ spoke up.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
The captain nodded.
Sure.
AJ continued.
Well, I don't know if I understand this right, but we just need more acceleration power, deceleration power, right?
The captain nodded again.
Yes.
AJ swallowed before finishing his question.
Don't each of the MFGs have a built-in backup? Could we run the backups at the same time as the regular ones for more power?
After a moment's thought, Ben grinned.
Holy shit, why not? I will need to tweak the power feeds, but I can rig the second set to energize at the same time, so yes.
The captain turned to AJ.
Looks like you just earned yourself a bonus, kid. Excellent. All right, let's get to work.
That evening, in the galley, the captain addressed the crew.
All right, everyone, we have a solid plan thanks to Amelia, Ben, and AJ here.
Helen and Doc congratulated AJ with hearty pats to his back, and Aunt Helen kissed him on the head, though he pulled away shyly. He continued,
Here's the plan.